Hey guys, a quick lesson on bar chords. I know a lot of beginners struggle with them, so we're going to have a look at them. First of all, talk about what they are, how they work, why are they hard, what are some workarounds, that sort of thing. So what is a bar chord, first of all? So a bar chord is essentially when we take an open chord, and the most common bar chord is based around this shape of the E major chord, which I'm playing now in open position. So we can take that shape and we can move it up the guitar and we can play that shape anywhere, but what we need to do is we need to replace the work that the machine head nut is doing in this open chord. It's essentially holding these strings in this position. So if we move up one fret, we need to move the work that the machine head nut is doing up fret 2, and we do that by using our index finger and barring it, turning our index finger into a bar that holds all the strings on that fret, basically all of them, with the exception of the strings that you're holding with the second, third and fourth finger, which are now assuming that E major shape. So generally speaking, I think when people are talking about the difficulty they're having with bar chords, they're talking about this E major shape bar chord. Okay, so first of all, equipment. There's various different types of guitars, and they will all have various levels of difficulty for playing bar chords. So an acoustic 6-string. Acoustic is going to be a little bit more difficult, generally speaking, than an electric. So Fender Stratocaster that's got very nice action. The strings aren't very far from the frets, so I don't have to do a lot of work to hold those strings down to the fret. So you would find, generally speaking, an electric guitar is going to be a little bit easier to play bar chords on. To the other end of that extreme, an acoustic 12-string, this is a Taylor. It's got fairly good action. Could actually do with a bit of work at the moment. But you obviously got twice as many strings to hold down, and this is tuned in standard tuning, the same as my 6-string was. So, but still possible. But I'm having to do a lot of work with that. I've got quite strong fingers from all the manual work that I do and playing guitar a lot. So for a beginner to hold a bar chord on a 12-string would be a big ask. And to get all that nice and tidy without any rattles, if you're not holding the chord down cleanly and nice and tight to the fret, you get little inconsistencies in each string. So yeah, learning to hold them all down cleanly and playing each note by note would really tell you, have I got that clean? Okay. Now, this bar chord, the F major bar chord, that's that E major shape played just at the first fret. So your index finger's playing the root note of F. So that's the F major bar chord. That's the hardest place to play it, really, because as I'm talking about bringing those strings to the fret, you've actually got the machine head nut kind of working against you. Right up this end of the guitar, it's holding the strings up because that's its job. So if we're trying to play that bar chord right there, and this is, if people are noticing, or I'm really struggling with bar chords, quite often they're trying to attack the F major bar chord. So there's a few workarounds. One workaround is a rhythmical thing. There's a lot of people, starting off that will think, well, I've got to hold this down, and the position of your thumb's important because you're creating a vice, right? And you're using this muscle in here, which over time will develop and become stronger, and why probably as a beginner guitarist, you might not even be ready to play bar chords. You might need to just build that strength up in your hand by playing licks and solos and scales and other open chords and things like that. And then once you get to the point where you've actually got that extra bit of strength, then eventually, it's time to try and start playing some bar chords. So yeah, right up here in that first fret position is the hardest place to play it. So workaround. I was going to say workarounds. A lot of beginners will think, well, I've got to get that and hold it, and let's say I'm playing 4 beats. I've got to hang on to this F for 4 beats before, let's say, I change to C, and you've got to 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're holding that bar chord down that whole time. You don't need to, and that's one of the little tricks. Is what I do generally if I'm playing a bar chord is each time I play the chord, that's when I'm holding the strings down. So I'm playing them and I'm releasing them, playing and releasing them. Right? Not necessarily, but if you're playing with other musicians, there's a band playing and that sort of thing, and if it's a slightly up tempo, you actually create this bit of a staccato kind of pulsing way of playing the chords out, right? So that there's a rest in between. You give your fingers that little bit of a rest. If you're trying to hold it down and just hold it down, and you might need to. If you need to, then you need to. But a lot of times you don't. You might be able to. So you're looking for a chance to just give this muscle a rest, give the tips of your fingers a rest. That you're doing a lot of work there. So a guitar with better action, whether it's an electric guitar, a nylon string guitar possibly. The nylon strings are a little bit easier on your fingers, they're a little bit stretchier, so you're not having to work against the steel strings as much, so there's that as well. What I've found is a really good workaround is this shape chord, where we're still playing with these, the first, second and third, second, third and fourth finger, we're still playing that E major shape. But instead of barring, what we're actually doing is we're just playing the bottom or the high 2 strings, so the high E and the B string. So there's that. Now what I'm doing as well is with my third finger, the tip of my third finger is up against this string that's muting it so it doesn't sound out, because we don't want that E, because it sounds horrible, in our F chord. Now this is essentially an inversion because the root note is no longer an F. So the root note is the lowest sounding note in the chord that you're playing, which is now C. Okay, so C is very closely related to F. But you will get away with that, and especially if there is a bass guitar playing, so the root note is there. So you might think about, well, if there's a band and they're all playing different things, the overall sound that's coming out is a chord. So if a bass player is playing this, you could have one guitarist playing this and another guitarist playing this, right? And the overall effect of that is a power chord essentially. So the point being, anyway, it's a bit of a workaround. This can be quite difficult, getting that index finger up there and holding all those strings down, where you've actually got to hold the root string and you've got to hold the high E and the B string at the same time with that shape. So you can take some rests in between chords, so you're squeezing it on and off rather than just holding it on that whole time. That can be really fatiguing. So there's that. There is just drop that index finger down and play that inversion. Play F in that way. And you can move that up, so that's G major, it's an inversion. A major. Right, so we've essentially still got this ability to slide this chord up. So just thinking about, I play Jumping Jack Flash. I play the Ronnie Wood parts in that song in a band, and it's in B. So there's a B, essentially a B major bar chord in that. But the other guitarist that plays the Keith Rowland plays the Keith parts is playing that root note. The bass guitarist is playing that B root note too on a bass guitar. So it's there, and I play my part by using that chord. So that's one particular song. So that's a real life example of where that little workaround, instead of playing, and there are some parts of that song, the intro for example, where I do play the full bar chord. So, and now another workaround, let's go back to F. So we've got our F major bar chord that's really, really hard to hold because of its position, it's close to the machine head nut. There's this little workaround where instead of the index finger working as a full bar chord, it's holding the high E and the B string. So there's that. We can strip it back even further. We're using our pinky here, and look, you should be using your pinky from the very, very beginning, and you should be making sure he's sharing the workload. Don't give him a holiday. Having said that, this chord is giving him a holiday. So it's another inversion where, actually it's not an inversion. So the root note now has become, it's still F, but it's an octave higher. And that's an F chord. So now playing it this way, thumb over the top muting the low E string. Now this finger that was muting the string above it before is now muting the A string, and my index finger is bridged. It's no longer flat like when I was playing it this way. What I'm doing is I'm just moving that finger down to the F on the D string, thumb over the top. That's a good cheat. That's a really good workaround because you're using three fingers. You're using this shape that it's pretty much the same shape that if you're playing a C major chord, and you're playing it in a very similar way. You're muting that top string with the tip of your finger. So basically, if you take a C major chord and you take your second and third fingers and move them down a string, mute the E string with your thumb, and you're muting the high E string with a little part of the index finger just underneath. So your index finger is holding the B string on the first fret, and at the same time it's just touching that E string so that it doesn't sound, because we don't want it in that chord. So C major shape, say, second and third string down a string to create this shape, so that we've got F as the root note, transferable chord there, which is really what you're chasing when you're wanting to play a bar chord. Now, so that's a workaround. You're going to find songs where, let's say we're playing those three chords. Not that these three chords would occur in a song, but so they're technically correct. They're all major chords. There's no notes ringing out that you don't like, so that's a really good workaround. And you're not doing the same kind of strength work with your fingers to try and hold those chords down. But tonally they're different, right? If we compare that, look. If we compare that to the full bar chord, has got that lower register in there, so it's a much fuller sounding chord. So look, yeah, maybe that's what you're chasing, and maybe that's what you really need to get to. Okay, but are you ready for it? Have you got the strength in your hand? Have you got a guitar that's got nice action to it? That's not, don't have to work too hard for it. And if not, there's a good workaround. Okay, so it's this chord here that I'm talking about. This workaround chord, it's got the same notes. The notes that we're playing are notes that are in this. There's just some notes in this that we're not going to play, and taking them out of the equation and playing it this way just makes it a much easier chord to hold. Okay, now another workaround is what you call a power chord, which is not really a bar chord because you don't have to create this bar with your index finger. So now an F power chord is just the index finger on that F root note, and then we're going to play the C, which is the fifth of F, and then we're going to play just the octave, like where we started this workaround chord. So essentially what we're doing is we're playing the three lowest notes, or the three bassiest notes of that chord, and that's a power chord. Okay, so you've got that bassy register in there, but it's also I'm not having to pick up the high strings with this part of my index finger, and I'm not using my second finger. So we're only holding three strings down. That's a bit of a stretch, but if old pinky's a bit weak, you could maybe do it that way, but you've got to have this big stretch here. I play a power chord that way, so I use my first finger, my third and my fourth, my pinky. Good workaround. So power chords, you can use power chords in anything. Traditionally they're used in rock, hard rock, used in metal a lot. And then that power chord, you can transfer that down a string too, so that your index finger now is muting that top string. And I'm really trying to not hit that E string. So I'm picking from the A string down. So, with it, three chord progression we're playing with, so full bar chords, F, G, A major, and then with the workaround, F, G, A major. With a power chord, it's major or minor. Don't know if you're ready for that yet, but it's this note here that is being played by the second finger. That note being present is what's making it sound a major sound, and it's the third of the major scale. So that's major, and if we lift it off and we play the full bar, that's minor, and that's a good point too. Is that this whole that's major? Lift that second finger up. without that second finger holding down which is essentially the third note of the major scale, because to make a major scale or a major chord into a minor, what you do is you take wherever that third note is, you take it back a semitone or back a fret. So when we lift that up, the note now that's playing is actually a note on the first fret on the, the G string. So the difference between that note and that note goes from major to minor, and you can hear the darkness in that minor chord, and that's, so that's the difference really. Do you want it to sound kind of uplifting, or do you want it to sound dark? They're all minor. So, which reminds me, a good workaround for minor bar chords too. Let me show you in a sec. So we're talking about power chords. Power chords, you're not playing that either down or not. So you're not playing the third and you're not playing a flattened third. So that being the case, this F, just those three notes, it's neither major or minor. It's F. It's F. So if you're playing a song and the chord is F major, you play the F power chord. If you're playing a chord that is F minor, you can play the F power chord as well, because it doesn't have that. It doesn't have either one of those. So it's not predetermined as being major or minor. So they're power chords, and as I said, you can transfer them down a string, and then wherever your index finger is sitting, then that's the root note of that chord, or the name. The root note is the name of the chord, the name of the scale. It's the bassiest note that you're playing determines the name. So wherever that falls, happens to be falling on D there, so that's a D power chord. That's a D power chord too, because that note is a D. G power chord, G power chord. Okay, so now we touched on just quickly, we're talking about the difference between full major bar chord, full minor bar chord. Okay, so that F minor bar chord, it's very difficult to play too. The workaround there, similarly to this workaround, where we're making this note, which is also an F. It's an octave higher than that F, so it's still an F chord. It's not an inversion. It's a true F chord. So based on that same little workaround where we've shortened that chord up and played less of the notes to make it easier, we can do a similar thing, and I play this chord a lot. It's that's the minor version. Okay, so if we play it like this, that's F major. This finger hasn't moved, but what we've done instead is, we've said that this note here is what's making it a major note. If we drop it down a fret to here, well then, and I've got to pick up the rest of those strings underneath. So what I'm doing is I'm barring this index finger, but I'm not barring it the whole way. I'm just barring the high three strings, so the high E, the B, and the G, and I'm playing it just from that root note string, which is the D string, down. Right, so that's a good little workaround for your minors. And you might see what I'm doing there. I don't generally have my thumb around, but I'm putting this second finger to use now, it's actually just touching the E and the A string, and it's muting them. So then I can be a little bit more strummy, right? If it's not on there, that sounds alright in A because the notes work. But if I play that in the F, it's dissonant. It's horrible because these two notes don't sound. They don't create nice intervals with the rest of them. So that's where I would just have that second finger. See, this becomes complicated now. Within itself is kind of a complicated way to play. So now that second finger touching is so that I can strum like I'm playing like a funky kind of strumming pattern. Remember we talked about at the start to that pulsing. So I'm not holding that chord down the whole time, and part of that is because of a rhythmical thing that I'm trying to do, but I'm taking advantage of the fact that I get to release that chord and release all those muscles just temporarily in between each little pulse. What it can do too, even with a full bar chord, that when you apply it, that little bit of motion can actually bring the strings to the fret, right? Whereas if they're already there, it's a bit like on Survivor when they're holding their own body weight for a long period of time. That's when the fatigue can really set in, and it's just like your muscles just want to release. But if you've got the opportunity to release and re-grab, that grabbing motion has power to it. So you can, if you time it, you can save your strength, and you can actually use a bit of momentum to get that chord held tight. A-shaped. So just backtracking all the way back to the start. I hope you're still with me. It's a lot, I know. I figure that anyone that's with me is just like, I've got to get this, okay? So if I've lost you at this point, I hope you've gotten some stuff from it. Great. If you're still with me, let's just have a look at the full bar chord we've been talking about is this E major shape. And it's called that because if you play it in open position, it's E major. If you play it somewhere else, it's G major, it's A major, it's B major, it's A sharp major or B flat major. Same, different way of calling it. They're based on this shape, the E major shape. So you would call this A major, but you're using an E major shape bar chord. I'm given that name because of this shape that we've pinched from the open position. So now that's A major in open position, and that's probably the second most used shape for a bar chord, where your root, like in your open position, the root note is the A string, the second lowest string on the guitar. So when we play it as a bar chord, that transfers. So your index finger here. Now some people can fit second, third, and pinky in that same kind of configuration and then bar it. I can't do that. Or say can't, I choose not to. I find it difficult to get all of the notes sounding nicely. So what I do instead is I essentially only hold the root note with my index finger, and then with my third finger I bar it, I flatten it to play the next three strings, so the D, the G and the B. And I don't play the high E string. And I'm essentially, the muting of that high E string is happening because it's quite tricky. The way that you have to bar this finger, you've actually got to bar it so it scoops up a little bit at the end, so that it's not you can't be holding that note down. This being the reason. Yeah, look, you could get away with it, but you're creating a different chord. It's not a true major chord. It's what have we got? It's the major sixth. So, look, it kind of works, but it's not a. It's a major add 6 or something like that. So anyway, I scoop up that little bit of that finger at the end there, so that it's muting that string, and that's your A-shaped bar chord. C, D, and eventually you want to get there because you've got all these songs like so 1, 4, 5 progressions, 1 chord, the 4 chord, the 5 chord, very, very common progression in rock and blues in particular. Yeah, so there's other bar chords too, and you're like, not that it really gets done. You can take a D shape bar chord and you can move that up too. I do that a grand total of never ever, because I don't feel the need to. I quite often move that D chord up, but I just play the 3 notes by themselves. And likewise, oh, that's a good point. A major shape that we've now moved up, using this crazy scooped up barred 3rd finger. So A major, but A minor as well. B flat minor, C minor, D minor, and that's a very commonly used bar chord as well. So I mean, essentially it's the E major shape bar chord moved down 1 string. Just to mess with your beginner's knowledge, that same shape transferred from here to here is going from major. So if your root note's on the E string, it's a major shape, but if your root note's on the A string, it's a minor shape. It's got that darkness to it, and that is to do with the way this B string is tuned differently. You have to drop that 3rd note of the scale, so 1, 2, 3, so A major scale. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, notes 8 or the same, right? Because there's only 7 notes there in the major scale. So the third note, right? If we to turn that into a minor scale, let's, right? That's the difference between major and minor. So that's, don't worry too much about it. But this shape, well, hang on, it's major there, down a string, it's minor, and that might throw you for a loop. But just understand it's because this B string, you know, when you're tuning a guitar, we go back here to tune. So you know, it's always 5th fret. That's in tune. The E string and the A string. The A string and the D string, the D string and the G string. But then if we want to do the same between the G and the B, we go to the 4th fret. Okay? And then for the last two, between the B and the E, we come back. So this one's different. So the B string doesn't tune consistently the same as the rest of the strings, and that's why we have this situation where we go from major shape, minor shape. E root note is major, same shape with the A string root note is minor. That's all you really need to know about that. So yeah, so in closing, F major, inversion, cheat, stripping the chord back using the thumb and muting that high E string. I think this is a big answer for a lot of you. You know, you're just beginning and you're trying to like work out these songs. Look, if there's an A major bar chord, that's your best friend, right? If you're not quite there finger strength wise yet, keep coming back to it and keep working on it and keep just checking, oh, you know what, I've got it now, I've got the finger strength, right? So don't cheat yourself and just stick to this. But look, I use all of them because sometimes that's what I need. There's a few of them, but they're the basics. I think that will do. I hope you've lasted that long. I bet you haven't. If you're watching this bit, congratulations. You're one of very few. Check ya.